Country Microphone, and today we're visiting in Hardin, which is, to change Joe Creason's expression just a little bit, the only town in Kentucky where I was born. I really wasn't born in the town either, out on Hardin RFD. But we're visiting today with a good friend of many years past, a great friend of my mother's and Dad's, Elta Darnall Pace, here in Hardin. Thank you for letting us come.
Thank you.
Now, we want to start off and ask you, Miss Elta, how old you are.
I'm 83.
You've passed...
Was 83 last May.
Well, you've got a good start on 81.
Well, I was 83 last May.
Now, what was your dad's name?
Poplin Darnall.
And he was a Marshall County also, and you were born here.
I was born in Marshall County.
And your mother, who was she?
She was a Trimble.
Well, you know, I went to school with a lot of Trimbles, Tom and Gerald, and let's see, their dad's name was
Lofton.
Lofton Trimble. Were you kin to them?
He was my uncle. He's my uncle.
Okay. And so that brings in two rather noted Marshall County families, the Trimbles and the Darnalls.
Right.
Now, there are lots and lots of Darnalls. I guess there's so many of them that there may not all be very close kin.
Well, it does drift off, but all the Darnalls are kin.
Well, I remember reading in history that the first Darnall here came in 1818, just a little while after Bannister Wade, for whom they named Wadesboro and Wades Creek.
Yeah.
And this man's name was Henry Clay Darnall. He was a primitive Baptist preacher, and he started Soldier Creek. Now, that was the first Darnall. I don't know how many others came also.
Well, I don't know. I can't give them by name, but my great aunt gave me the names of 9 brothers. Darnalls.
Yes.
And my great-granddaddy was one of them. And Nook Darnall was one, and Ab Darnall, and I can't recall all of them because I wasn't familiar with them too much. But my great-granddaddy was Jackson Darnall. And married Betty Williams.
All right, you were born here, and did you go to school at Hardin?
No, I went to school to Liberty School, country school out here.
Well, now that has to be one of the first. Was there a Liberty Church of Christ nearby?
Not that I know of, but they held service in the schoolhouse. Old Uncle Marion Anderson preached in the schoolhouse.
Now, histories say that there was a Liberty Church of Christ, the first one in the county, and it was started by a man named Marshall Starks. He began it in 1832. Of course, that was a long time before you were born. So I guess by the time you were in school, that church perhaps had become Union Hill.
Probably.
Wadesboro Church and Liberty merged, and that's the reason in uniting those two old congregations, they called it Union Hill.
Union Hill.
All right. Now, so you went to Liberty. Do you remember any of your teachers?
I remember every one of them. General Starks was my first one. Eiler Hyatt Hames was my second one. Garfield Cope, I went to him about 4 terms. And Robert L. Marr, 1 term.
Now, there was a lawyer in Paducah named Robert L. Meyer.
That's him.
Yeah.
That's him.
And I believe he had a brother who published the Tribune in Benton at one time. I've forgotten what his name was.
I have too.
Everybody called him Witch.
But
now-
I think he taught at Union Hill one term.
Mhm. Yeah. I went to college with his daughter,
Mhm.
Anna Merle, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, so you do remember all those teachers.
Yeah, I remember when I went to Mr. Garfield 4 or 5 terms. It was broken with Rob Meyer.
Could you tell us what a day in school was like back then? I know now they go in and there's one teacher in one room and they teach first grade. Now then, they were all together, weren't they?
Where we were. In the first school, we had a chart, and the teacher took a pointer and he'd turn them leaves, and there'd be names that we had learned to spell on that chart.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a book.
Mm-hmm.
That's what way we learned to spell, and
Isn't that interesting?
that was my first school.
I haven't heard that story exactly before, so you've
Well,
really given us a gem there.
That's what it was. It's just a big chart, and those leaves would go over, and he'd take a pointer and turn those leaves, and there's the cat, dog, whatever, and that's what we learned from day to day.
Oh, that's precious, isn't it? And was there a bench up front?
Yeah, a long bench and little seats in the back,
Mm-hmm.
and a wood stove kindly in the middle for winter.
Mm-hmm.
And we gather around that a lot of times to say our lessons.
Mm-hmm. What did you do for a cafeteria?
We carried our lunch from our table at home. That's what way we did.
Mm-hmm.
We never had what they have now. We had to carry our lunch or do it out.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I went to school, that's what we had to do.
So Mama fixed you chicken leg,
Yeah, whatever we had,
biscuit, and
right.
piece of meat.
Put it in a little bucket or a little box or something. That's
Once in a while, you'd have a pie or cookies. I can remember my mother fixing pies that they looked about like half moons. You remember?
fried pies, we
Yeah.
call them.
Oh, I could eat a good apple pie like that now.
I could too.
Yeah.
But school is so much different now to what it was the days when I went.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know what it was to go a night to a ball game and all that. We didn't have that.
You didn't have a gymnasium. did
No, no. Our ball playing was out on the yard, schoolyard,
you? And it was
at dinner hour and recess.
something similar to baseball.
Yeah, right,
That
right.
type. You remember any other games that you liked?
Well, we played Whoop Over the River, it was called, a lot.
Mhm.
And we played marbles.
Yeah.
And, well, that's about it. Ball.
Mm-hmm. Now, did they ever have anything they called a spelling bee?
Not really. We had spelling one night, a night spelling,
Mm-hmm.
and choose anybody that wanted to. I remember us having one of them.
Mm-hmm. And you stood up till you
Yeah.
missed a word.
You missed the word, you turned the fella down, whoever it was.
And at the end, when the one that was at the front of the line was the winner.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I remember some of those too. Now, what about when Christmas would come along? Did you put on a program for the community?
Oh, well, most of the time we did. We call it a play.
Mhm.
We called it something like a play.
Yeah.
And,
And you were the angel.
well, I was in it sometimes.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I was in whatever we had.
And what about things they called box suppers or pie suppers?
We had them along.
And did you bake a pie?
Yeah, and box suppers we called them, and I always took them, and I always shared what we're supposed to in school.
Now the boys would buy those pies,
right,
and then you got to eat
right,
with the boy.
right.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And,
very good.
Well, we had them, well, now and then, scattered along.
Was your dad a farmer?
Yeah, he was a farmer.
Did you have to work on?
Yes, I had to work. I run home of an evening to help in the tobacco patch so I could go to school the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And I went 2 terms without missing a day.
Well, that's quite a record in an agricultural
Right.
type setting. You had to worm and sucker.
Yeah, we had to work when we got home, or we didn't have to help with the field.
I imagine you started out pretty small, dropping
Yes.
plants.
Yes, I sure did. I don't remember how small, but I started cooking for my mother and daddy when I was 6 years old.
Oh, me.
Mama was sick, and she told me what to put in everything. And I had a box, and I'd get on that box and set it up on the stove. And we lived over here we called the Brannon place at that time.
And I imagine this stove was a wood stove.
Wood stove, 4-eye.
Yeah.
A little 4-eye.
It didn't have the big warming closet.
Just
and
a
water heater.
box stove.
Yeah.
Was what it was called.
Oh, I know what those
Yeah.
are. My
Mhm.
mother had one,
Yeah.
and I remember it well. In fact, we didn't get what I call a uptown range.
No, we didn't either.
It was a wood stove.
We was lucky.
But I believe it must have been about 1938 or 39, somewhere along there. Dad had got real prosperous.
Yeah, I remember them. I remember then.
And he bought one, and it had it was black cast iron, but what made it so pretty to me was it had an oven, and a thermometer in the door,
Mhm.
and up at the
Had
top,
warming closet up
warming
at the
closet.
top.
Yeah. Boy, I thought we had equaled Rockefeller.
Well, he might have bought that at the store where I worked.
Probably did. I guess he did.
I started there in 26.
Now, what store was that?
Ryan Miller Company.
Hmm. That was over on what we then called Main Street. I
Yeah,
believe they call
across
it
from the
Commerce
bank.
now. And the bank was on the east side of the street, and you were over on the west
Right.
side.
Right.
Oh, I've gone in there, and my eyes would be as big as saucers. They had everything, horse
Anything
collars,
you wanted, you could get it there.
and didn't they have an elevator?
Had
that
an elevator you pulled by the rope. I've pulled it several times.
Yeah.
And carried our furniture up on the first floor.
Uh-huh.
And we sold it. We brought it down on the first floor
Ground floor.
on the
Yeah.
that elevator.
Customer bought something and
Yeah.
brought it
I
down.
pulled it up and down several times.
Wasn't that pretty hard work?
Well, it was pretty heavy, but
You were used to it. Thought little about it,
I
probably.
thought, right.
All
That's all I ever knew was work.
was to work.
Mhm.
Well, let's talk.
I worked there 7 years. I went to work there in 26 and quit in 33, even that's around 7 years.
Were you married then?
Yeah. Yeah, I was married.
Well, tell me about how you met your husband.
In school. We went to the same school,
Yeah.
and we was in the same class. And
Everything worked
yeah,
out real
yeah,
fine.
right. I hated him though.
Well, now you explain that just a little bit. Did
Well, I
he
just-
did he pull your pigtail? or
Well,
something?
no, I don't know, well, I can't hardly explain it because he just wasn't my type, didn't seem like. He was different.
Now that's what you thought at first. But
Yeah,
after
yeah,
you came
yeah,
to love him,
yeah.
then you were married and you had
Right.
a happy married life.
Right. and we lived together. I couldn't tell you just exactly how many years, but about 60-some years.
Now, what was his name?
Raleigh Pace.
Mm-hmm. And he worked around.
He
Hardin,
was
too?
a farmer and hard out a little
Mm-hmm.
here and there.
Yeah.
But he was really a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
He milked cows
So at this
and
dep-
sold milk
Yeah.
to the,
Did you ever have a cream separator?
yeah, still got it, my niece has.
Well, let me
Yeah, we
ask-
had a cream separator, and we sold cream then, cream
Wednesday
station down
and
here.
Saturday.
Yeah, and then later on, he sold milk in the can to the milk plant
Up at Murray.
at Murray.
Mhm.
Right.
Did you ever hear of a cold water separator?
That's what we had.
Mhm.
That's the kind we had.
Now, you tell me how that worked.
Well, you strained your milk into this big separator, and poured a little water, cold water in it, and then the cream would rise, and then you'd turn the faucet here and let all of that out till you got to your cream, and then you'd let your cream down in your cream bucket.
Now, how did you know when the milk all ran out and you were down to the cream?
Well, the cream is different color to the milk. The milk was kind of bluish looking, and the cream was sort of creamy color.
Was there a little glass gauge
Yeah, there's a
down one
glass
side?
there that you could see where how far it went.
So you could tell
Mhm.
right when it came down.
Right when to turn your faucet when your water come out.
And I thought today's generation wouldn't know how those
No,
work.
I don't imagine.
Because I haven't seen one
I
lately.
don't guess that know how to milk a cow today.
Probably not.
There's not many of them that have them.
Yeah.
And I doubt if they would know how to milk a cow now.
We lived out to what we called the Wadesboro Road and on the Booker farm
Yeah.
till we bought it in 1944. And I milked those cows till I graduated from college
Yeah.
and left home.
mhm.
Had to go off to the Navy in World War II. And I don't guess I've milked a cow since, but seemed
Well,
like I believe I could.
I milked our cow before I married, that we had to use our milk on the table.
Hmm.
And I learned my husband how to milk the cow.
Do you remember when you got your first automobile?
Yeah.
And
My-
was it a Model T? or-
No, it was well, I can't describe it hardly. It was a closed-in car, and it was a Chevrolet, and it was two-seated car.
Yeah, a sedan.
Yeah.
Fancy car by my
Yeah.
standards, anyway.
Yeah, I don't remember what year it was, but anyway, I was working at Ryan Miller's, and I'd walk home, cook dinner or cook bread for dinner, and walk back to work. So I got the car where I could go back and forth. We lived out here in the field, right over here,
Out toward where
in
the
behind the
crossroads is now?
in behind that store where the store used to be.
The grocery store
Yeah,
today.
It was in that field back there.
Uh-huh.
We lived there at that time.
And Hardin seemed a good little bit of ways, didn't it?
Yes, it was to walk home at dinner and walk back.
Well, it was over a mile, I
Yeah,
expect.
right,
Certainly.
right.
All right, now, I see you've got a beautiful quilt started here. You're still working at the age of
83. Yeah,
Well,
yeah. I quilt and
what,
piece quilts and
what pattern is that?
wedding ring.
Hmm. Well, that's one of the beauties. Now, they're having a national quilt show at Paducah about once a year at the Executive
I
Inn.
entered that last year.
Mhm.
I
Well, did
I had
you
a
get
quilt
any kind
in that.
of a ribbon?
No, I didn't, but I got 125, number 125 out of 400.
That's
I got
good.
that far.
Very good.
And But my niece did it for me,
Yeah,
that lives in Georgia.
you were about you were better or around the top 25%.
Yeah,
So that's,
I was 125 out of 400.
well, this is a beautiful quilt to me, and I see that you don't do it quite the way my mother used to. Now
They used to swing them in from the ceiling. Yeah. I have had them that way, but I like this better.
Yeah.
And it's easier for one person.
Now you've already finished piecing this quilt.
Oh yeah,
and so
I'm
you're,
quilting it now.
you're quilting it. And you put the cotton bats.
Yeah, all
they
my cotton's in there and everything.
Do they still have a brand called Mountain Mist?
That's what I use. I don't use nothing else in my quilts.
Well, I don't know how
I
I
won't,
thought of that.
well, I don't buy nothing else but Mountain Mist polyester.
Mm-hmm.
It goes in mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I've went to the art and crafts show over here across the river. They moved it over there. It was over here. 14 years they've had it. I believe it's 14 or 16. I won't say for sure. But anyway, I missed 2 years. Since I've had my heart attack, I've missed the last 2 years. And I've sold every one I took over there.
About what does a quilt bring now?
Well, it depends on its different prices. I get anywhere from $2.75 for mine now. But I did sell them for $50 and
Oh, years ago,
Yeah,
they
right.
brought a lot less. But prices have changed now on everything.
And everything else is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I told them, thread that I quilt with is $1.25 a spool now. And I've sold a lot of them, 6 for a quarter.
Over at Ryan
Ryan
Miller
Miller's.
Company. Yeah.
6 for a quarter, same amount of yards.
And it was genuine
And it
Clark's ONT.
ONT, and this is a lot of it old synthetic stuff, I call it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference.
Yes. Well, I suppose if you could find pure cotton thread, it'd be higher than that.
I probably would, but you don't find it.
Mhm.
You don't find that anymore.
No.
And I try to use the best of everything I can get in my quilts.
Well,
And-
you're going to have to start charging $300.
Well, it's going to come to that, I think. But,
Do you ever make any patterns besides this one?
oh yeah, I make a lot of different patterns.
Do you remember
I
the
sold,
names of any of them?
I sold Kentucky Fried Chicken Manager, Dresden Plate.
A Dresden plate.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful quilt,
Yeah.
isn't it?
and she didn't see it till she opened her box. And
Bought it
bought
sight
it on the
unseen.
phone.
Yeah. Well, was she happy?
Well, she wrote me a letter and said she was.
That's all we can
And
go
then
by.
when I got sick, she sent me a get well card.
Wonderful.
So she must have been pleased.
Must have liked it
Yeah.
very much.
Mhm.
Do they still make a quilt called? Seemed like my mother made one called Dutch Doll. Or
Yeah,
something
Dutch
like that.
dolls. Oh, I've got stacks of books in there with all kinds of patterns and
Now, when you were smaller, it was fairly common to make the family clothing, wasn't it? The
oh
women
yeah,
made all
I sewed for everybody in the country till, well, not too many years ago. I made our cheerleaders suits down here 1 year,
Mhm.
and I sewed for everybody on the machine, you know.
Yeah.
And I used to do a lot of that, but I quit that and gone to this altogether.
Well, you can set your own pace.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah,
have to get it
right,
out at
right,
any
right,
certain time. And
Right.
if you make a cheerleader outfit,
Yeah.
they want it
They
yesterday.
want it right now.
Yeah,
And,
immediately.
So I made 3 of them down here, cheerleader set.
Well, let's ask you about anything else you'd like to tell us
Well,
about.
did you want to know about my grandfather and grandmother and all of them?
Oh, yes, all you'll tell us.
Well, my granddaddy Trimble was a half Indian. He came here from Tennessee, and he came barefooted. And he hired to my great-grandfather, and that's where he met my grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
and they married. Then they went out on their own, and they accumulated a great big farm over here at the Big Hill.
Yes.
And the first train that went through there, went around through his farm. And my mother saw the first train that went through there.
Now, that was a long time ago.
Well, that's a long time ago.
1890, I believe it was.
Well, she saw the first train, and she said there was a lot of them gathered on top of that big hill, looked down to see that train go by.
Yeah.
And
They used to tell a story when I was a boy about the fellow that said he started running away, and they said, "What are you running for?" And he said, "Well, I'm afraid it'll come through here sideways."
well, anyway, that big hill was my granddaddy's.
He owned that
He
farm.
owned that farm and all a bunch of it back in there.
I know.
And his house was on top. I called it on top of the big hill, but it was a good long ways back.
Mm-hmm.
It was where their home was.
Yeah.
And
Did you ever make any lye soap?
yeah, I helped myself.
Uh-huh.
But I seen my grandmother do something that I have never seen no one else ever. Big old field pumpkins, peel that pumpkin and slice it in little thin slices and sling it up on a quilting frame in front of the fireplace and dry that pumpkin.
Dried.
Dried that
Well.
pumpkin, and then when she got ready to cook it cooked it just like dried apples,
Mm-hmm.
made her pies and fried it. I
I've
seen that with my eyes.
never heard that story
Well, I
before.
didn't, there's not many.
And I'm glad you told that.
There's
because
not many that has.
I don't believe very many
But
would
she's
know
the
that.
only one that I've ever in all of my doings. But she had her quilting frame swinging to the ceiling in front of a great big fireplace.
Mhm.
And just hanging it up on that
Yeah.
thing and dried it. Took
Well,
it down.
It sounds reasonable. If you can dry apples,
yeah.
you could
Well,
dry
she
pumpkin.
did that.
I guess you could dry peaches.
Yeah, I've dried peaches myself.
Mhm.
We used to have peaches before I married, and we'd dry peaches and put them up on the roof of our kitchen tin roof and dry them.
A good place.
And
because
they
it got
dry
hot.
in a few days. And
We got one more minute now. What do you want to make your last words?
well, I don't know, Ray. I couldn't tell you exactly.
It's been a real pleasure to visit with you. And I appreciate your letting me come.
Did I tell you I had a great aunt live to be 108?
108.
I've got her picture
Oh me.
cutting her 108th birthday cake.
What was her name?
Bird, Ethel Bird.
Ethel Bird.
And she was on the TV at Paducah
Mhm.
cutting her 108th birthday. Now I've got her picture in my...
Now, you'll have to go to 109 to beat her.
Oh, I can't never make that.
Well, thank you so much. This has been
Well-
a real joy to me.
Well, it may not be much history, but anyway, you
It's-
never heard of dried pumpkin.
It's good history. We've been visiting in Hardin with Elta Darnall Pace. We return you now to our studio in Benton.